The morning of my divorce hearing, my husband walked into the courtroom smiling like he'd already won. He leaned over and whispered, "You'll leave here with nothing." His girlfriend laughed loud enough for everyone to hear and added, "She doesn't deserve a single dime." I didn't argue. I didn't even look at them. Instead, I quietly handed my attorney a sealed letter and asked him to give it to the judge when the time was right. 5 minutes later, the judge opened it, read 2 paragraphs, looked up, and said 4 words that changed everything. Well, this changes things. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 38 years old, and the last thing my husband whispered to me before our divorce hearing began was, "You'll leave here with nothing." He smiled when he said it, like the outcome had already been decided. 5 years earlier, hearing those words would have broken me. That morning, they barely made me blink, because I already knew something he didn't. But to understand why, you have to go back 15 years. I met Ethan when we were both 23. He had big dreams and very little money. I had a steady accounting job, a tiny apartment, and enough optimism for both of us. He wanted to start his own software company. Everyone told him it was too risky. I didn't. I believed in him. When we got married 2 years later, we agreed on one simple plan. I'd provide stability while he built the business. Once it succeeded, we'd enjoy the rewards together. At least, that was the dream. The first 3 years were difficult. Really difficult. Some months the company earned almost nothing. There were nights when Ethan came home convinced he should quit. I'd sit beside him at our tiny kitchen table, pour him another cup of coffee, and remind him why he'd started. "We're going to get through this," I'd tell him. And somehow, we always did. I worked overtime almost every week. My paycheck covered the mortgage, the groceries, utilities, health insurance, even most of the company's early software expenses when investors backed out. I postponed graduate school because we couldn't afford both. I delayed buying a new car. I skipped vacations. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile because I believed we were building something together. Whenever Ethan thanked me, he'd say the same thing. "One day, all of this will be ours." I believed every word. Then everything changed. In the company's 7th year, one of Ethan's products unexpectedly became a huge success. Within 18 months, his business expanded across 3 states. Interviews, awards, magazine covers, business conferences. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know Ethan Carter. At first, I was proud. Watching someone you love achieve their dream is a beautiful thing. Until success started changing him. He stopped asking about my day. Dinner conversations became one-sided presentations about investors, revenue, and expansion. He hired assistants for work, but somehow expected me to continue handling everything at home. When I suggested finally returning to graduate school, he barely looked up from his phone. "Why?" The single word caught me off guard. "What do you mean, why?" "You don't need another degree." "I've always wanted one." He shrugged. "Seems unnecessary now." Little by little, the partnership we'd built disappeared. Business trips became more frequent. Late-night meetings became routine. Weekend plans were constantly canceled. Every concern I raised was dismissed the same way. "You're overthinking. You worry too much. It's just work." I wanted to believe him. Until one evening, while organizing paperwork for our accountant, I found hotel reservations that didn't match any conferences listed on Ethan's calendar. I didn't accuse him. Not yet. Instead, I quietly started paying attention. The signs became impossible to ignore. Phone calls he took outside. Messages deleted the moment they arrived. Sudden passwords on devices that had never needed them before. Then one afternoon, I overheard a conversation he thought I couldn't hear. "I'll handle the divorce soon," he said. "I just need everything positioned first." My entire world went silent. Not because he wanted a divorce, because he'd apparently been planning one without saying a single word to me. That night, I didn't cry. I sat alone in our living room until sunrise. Then I made a decision. If our marriage had already ended in his mind, I wasn't going to beg him to stay. The next morning, I hired a divorce attorney. Her name was Linda Morales. After reviewing everything I'd brought, she leaned back in her chair. "Rachel, how much documentation do you have?" I opened a folder nearly 3 inches thick. Bank statements, tax returns, emails, loan records, receipts dating back more than a decade. She looked genuinely impressed. You've kept all of this? I've always believed paperwork tells the truth. Over the next several weeks, Ethan hired one of the city's most expensive legal teams. Mutual friends began calling me. Apparently, Ethan had been telling everyone exactly how the divorce would end. He says you'll never touch a penny of his company. He keeps saying he built everything himself. I simply thanked people for letting me know. I never argued, never defended myself. The truth didn't need me to shout. The morning of the hearing, Linda adjusted the stack of files on our table. Are you ready? I looked toward the courtroom doors. I'm done fighting. I smiled quietly. I'm ready for the truth. Just then Ethan walked in wearing an expensive tailored suit. Behind him came his attorney. And seated confidently in the gallery was the woman I'd seen in those hotel reservations. She caught my eye, smiled. Then Ethan leaned toward me. You should have settled when I offered. I said nothing. The courtroom doors opened. Everyone stood. As the judge entered and prepared to begin the proceedings, I reached into my briefcase, removed one carefully sealed envelope, and quietly handed it to Linda. Please, I whispered, give this to the judge when the time is right. The courtroom became completely silent as the judge took his seat. My attorney, Linda, organized our files while Ethan leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided. He didn't even look nervous. Why would he? He thought the company, the investments, and the future we'd built together belonged only to him. His attorney stood first. Your Honor, he began. Mr. Carter built his business through his own vision, leadership, and hard work. While Mrs. Carter was certainly his spouse, she made no meaningful contribution to the creation or growth of the company. We ask the court to recognize the business as his separate achievement. Ethan nodded proudly. Then he looked at me. A faint smile crossed his face. It was the same smile he'd worn the morning he promised we'd build our future together. Only now, it carried no warmth. The judge turned toward Linda. Mrs. Carter's response? Linda stood calmly. We'll address those statements, Your Honor. She didn't argue. She didn't accuse anyone of lying. Instead, she walked quietly to the clerk's desk and handed over the sealed envelope I'd given her. This was prepared by my client. The judge adjusted his glasses. What exactly is it? A chronological summary of documented financial support and relevant records already included in discovery. The judge nodded. I'll review it. He carefully opened the envelope. The entire courtroom watched in silence. Ethan crossed his arms confidently. His girlfriend glanced toward me with an amused expression. Neither of them seemed concerned. The judge began reading. His eyes moved slowly down the first page. Then the second. He stopped. Went back. Read one paragraph again. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Carter? Yes, Your Honor. You organized these records yourself? I did. He nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate clear timelines. He returned to the letter. The first page wasn't emotional. There were no accusations. No dramatic language. Only dates. March 2011. Rachel withdrew $28,000 from her personal savings to cover company payroll after investor funding was delayed. Supporting documents attached. September 2012. Rachel refinanced her vehicle to reduce monthly expenses, allowing additional household income to support business operations. Supporting bank statements attached. February 2013. Rachel postponed graduate school to continue working full-time while Ethan focused exclusively on company growth. Then came copies of emails. One caught the judge's attention. It was from Ethan. I couldn't have kept the company alive without you. Someday everything we build will belong to both of us. The courtroom remained silent. The judge continued reading. Another email. Thank you for covering the mortgage again. I promise this sacrifice won't be forgotten. Another. Every investor meeting is possible because you're keeping everything else together. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. The silence beside me was changing. The confidence he'd walked in with was beginning to disappear. The judge reached for the financial exhibits already submitted by both legal teams. He compared dates, bank records, loan documents, corporate filings. Every few moments, he made another handwritten note. Then he looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Carter. Yes, Your Honor. You testified that the business was entirely self-funded after its first year. That's correct. The judge lifted one document. Then could you explain this transfer? Ethan frowned. His attorney leaned forward immediately. What transfer? The $28,000 deposit made into the business operating account. His attorney quickly reviewed the exhibit. That appears to be. He stopped speaking. The judge continued calmly. It matches the same amount withdrawn from Mrs. Carter's personal savings account on the same day. No one spoke. The judge turned another page. You also stated your household expenses were independently managed. Another document appeared. Yet these records indicate Mrs. Carter paid the mortgage, insurance, utilities, and healthcare premiums for nearly 4 consecutive years while the business operated at a loss. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. His attorney whispered something into his ear. For the first time that morning, neither of them looked confident. The judge wasn't finished. There also appears to be correspondence acknowledging Mrs. Carter's financial contributions. He held up another printed email. This message specifically thanks her for keeping the company alive. The room was so quiet I could hear pages turning. The judge looked over the top of his glasses. Mr. Carter, were these statements accurate when you wrote them? Ethan hesitated. His attorney interrupted. Your Honor, we'd appreciate a brief recess. The judge raised one hand. In a moment, he returned to my timeline one final time before placing it neatly on the bench. Then he looked directly at me. Mrs. Carter. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. The room remained silent. He gently tapped the organized timeline with his pen. This isn't an emotional argument. It's a factual one. He looked toward both attorneys. Based on today's testimony and these supporting documents, the court is ordering additional review of the financial disclosures before any determination regarding asset division is made. Ethan's smile was gone. His girlfriend slowly lowered her eyes toward the floor. The judge gathered the remaining documents before adding one final sentence. When the facts are presented this clearly, they deserve to be examined just as carefully. The courtroom reconvened 3 weeks later. During that time, the court-appointed financial review team examined every document. Bank statements, tax returns, corporate records, loan agreements, email archives. Everything. I didn't spend those weeks celebrating. There was nothing to celebrate. A marriage had ended. No amount of paperwork could erase that. When I walked back into the courtroom, Ethan looked different. The confidence he'd worn during the first hearing had disappeared. His expensive suit was still perfectly tailored, but the certainty behind his eyes was gone. The judge entered, reviewed the final report, and spoke calmly. The financial review confirms that Mrs. Carter made substantial documented financial contributions during the company's formative years. He turned another page. The evidence also confirms that several earlier statements regarding the source of funding and household financial responsibilities were incomplete. No one said a word. The judge continued. Accordingly, the marital assets will be divided based upon the verified financial record and the applicable law. That was it. No dramatic speeches. No shouting. Just the truth. After months of uncertainty, the facts spoke for themselves. The hearing ended less than 30 minutes later. As people began leaving the courtroom, Ethan remained seated. His attorney quietly gathered his files and stepped outside. Even the woman who had sat smiling behind him during the first hearing slipped out without saying a word. For the first time in years, it was just the two of us. He looked across the courtroom. Rachel. I stopped walking. I was wrong. His voice sounded quieter than I'd ever heard it. I kept telling myself that once the company became successful, everything before that didn't matter anymore. He looked down at his hands. But it did. I didn't answer immediately. He continued. I convinced myself I built everything alone because it was easier than admitting how much I depended on you. His eyes finally met mine. I'm sorry. There was no anger left inside me. Only acceptance. I didn't spend 15 years helping you because I wanted credit. He nodded. I know. I helped because I loved you. Another silence settled between us. I never wanted this to become a battle. Neither did I, he admitted. I just wanted the truth. He closed his eyes for a moment. You deserve that. I wished him well. Not because he had earned forgiveness that morning, but because carrying bitterness any longer would only keep me tied to a life that was already over. A month later, the settlement was finalized. The financial outcome was fair. Not extravagant. Not symbolic. Simply fair. For the first time in years, I wasn't building someone else's future. I was finally building my own. Instead of buying a bigger house or taking an expensive vacation, I invested in something I'd postponed for almost 15 years. My own consulting firm. A business dedicated to helping small family-owned companies organize their finances and grow responsibly. Ironically, the dream I delayed while helping Ethan build his company became the foundation of my next chapter. The first client who walked through my office doors reminded me of us years earlier. Young. Hopeful. Trying to build something meaningful. This time, I wasn't standing behind someone else's dream. I was standing inside my own. Sometimes people ask whether I felt victorious after the divorce. The truth surprises them. I never wanted revenge. Revenge would have kept me looking backward. What I wanted was acknowledgement, not applause, not sympathy. Just the simple recognition that quiet sacrifices matter, even when they happen behind closed doors. The courtroom gave me that. But something even more important happened long before the judge read my letter. I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's appreciation. For years, I believed my value depended on whether the person beside me recognized everything I'd done. I was wrong. My value had been there all along. The judge didn't create it. The documents didn't create it. The settlement didn't create it. They simply revealed what had always been true. And as I locked the door to my new office on my first day in business, I smiled. Because the greatest thing I walked away with wasn't part of any settlement. It was the confidence to know that the strongest foundation I would ever build was the one beneath my own life.